Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and in today's video we're going to have a look at the latest from the live radar, run through the UKV, have a look at the precipitation and the temperature over the course of the next 5 days. It's raining very unsettled, generally mild, at least for the next 2 or 3 days before it's turning cooler towards the end of the weekend and start of next week, but nothing really cold, just generally more seasonable, back down towards average conditions for the time of year. We'll then have a look at the GFS, GEM, Eastern WF and the ensemble, see what they're showing over the course of the last few weeks. It is remaining very unsettled, at least for the next 5 to 7 days, but we've kept alluding to the possibility of a pattern change towards the middle of the month, so in about 10 days time, and we are continuing to see perhaps a renewed signal for that on the models today. Definitely more higher pressure building in, definitely on the GFS and the GEM, and the Eastern WF has a bit more amplification, indicating higher pressure in places, but not dominating on that run. So definitely signs perhaps of something different towards the middle of the month, whether it is a proper high pressure system coming in and giving us dry, cooler conditions, whether it's a bit of ridging in the Atlantic giving us more variations in air masses, so seeing colder conditions come in times, snow in the north. We'll have to see, but there definitely are renewed signs of higher pressure making more of an influence, but what capacity, we'll have to continue to see how it does evolve. So do remember, if you enjoy my videos, make sure you like and subscribe, and remember to follow me on Twitter as well, the link's in the description. And after you start on live radar, you can see it is widely quite a miserable day today. Now, across most of England and Wales, you can see there's a lot of these areas of small green, which is indicating light precipitation, quite small showers, and generally these are just light areas of rain or drizzle in very thick cloud ahead of the weather front that is moving in. So some areas you might see a bit of a break in the clouds between these showers and it might be alright, but most areas are stuck under quite drab, drizzly conditions, and it is quite horrible. It's another quite mild day though, with temperatures back around that sort of 10 to 12 degree mark. You can see to the north and west we've got a big weather front heading into Scotland, but it sort of disappears when you go out into the Irish Sea and across the Republic of Ireland. But you can see this line of darker colours here, which is indicating slightly heavier rain. That is actually that weather front continued, but it hasn't really engaged too much, but it is forecasted to get a lot stronger and a lot more enhanced over the course of the next sort of 6 hours or so, turning into a larger weather front as it heads eastwards, with this sort of being the squally feature within it developing. So definitely looks likely over the course of the next few hours or so, more heavier rain will be spreading in from the west quite widely. We'll just have to see again how it does develop, but yeah, another quite wet, windy and horrible evening and overnight coming for many. At the moment, though, during the afternoon, that wet and windy, horrible weather has arrived for most of Scotland, with quite torrential rain falling there through the central areas. Again, no weather warnings issued for this. I'm a bit surprised looking at the intensities of this precipitation. Again, falling onto very saturated ground, but again, I'm sure we'll see more weather warnings issued over the coming days. If you put on the temperatures, you'll be able to see it is a generally very mild day once again. Even across parts of Scotland, it's pretty mild. You saw on the precipitation there was very little winteriness at all within the precipitation, and you can see at the moment, once again, yes, it's cold over the higher ground, again, not too unusual for this time of year, but we're seeing yellows infiltrating to most mid to low-lying areas in Scotland, again indicating temperatures around that sort of 8 to 10 degree mark or higher, and further southwards quite thick yellows here, indicating temperatures maybe 10, 12, 13 degrees possible here. So incredibly mild this time of year, but as I said, mid-range of the next 5 to 10 days, it does look likely to be turning cooler, especially towards the start of next week. So do now go over to the UKV and have a look at what that is showing over the course of the next few weeks. You can see that precipitation moving into the north at the moment, and you can see as I'm recording this around 3 p.m. that weather front across parts of Eastern Ireland is not particularly engaged, but it does increase in intensity over the course of this evening. You can see how it does actually turn into a proper weather front with a good few hours of precipitation there and some heavier precipitation within it as well as it heads southwards and eastwards with a bit of a squall feature in there. So luckily it's falling overnight, but if you are out and about around 1, 2, 3 a.m. in the south and the east, you'll be coming up against this squall feature, and it could be quite treacherous conditions for maybe 15-20 minutes as it does spread through. Beyond that, it does go drier, and for many waking up tomorrow, it'll be a generally dry start apart from a few showers across Scotland, but cloud will be increasing over the course of Friday afternoon as another weather system arrives. So yes, a drier day through Friday for many, at least in the morning to early afternoon. For the afternoon to evening, thicker cloud spreads in and a few showers, and then as we head through the late evening. You can see heavy precipitation coming in from the west. Again, could be some squally features within that, with some brighter reds there appearing, and then through Saturday afternoon, eventually clearing through the east with a lot of heavy, perhaps thundery, blustery showers coming in from the west. So a very unsettled day on Saturday. So yeah, weather front arriving through the morning will be very miserable. A brief dry spell before big showers come back in through the afternoon, and that continues all the way through to Sunday. Could see some heavy persistent rain in the far southeast there through Sunday morning. Elsewhere though, just showery, and some areas will see drier, clearer skies, but there's going to be a big risk of showers at times. As we head into Monday, you can see again the flow is more from a northwesterly, and that's why it's turning slightly cooler and a bit of winteriness over the higher ground of Scotland. And then eventually, as we head to 120 hours out to day 5, you can see another weather system's pushing in, but you can see how it is slightly further southwards than the system's moving through at the moment, and that's all because the jet stream has dropped a few hundred miles further southwards, meaning Scotland's on the cold side of the jet, as we look at the upper air temperatures on the cold side of the jet here, with that milder air trying to infiltrate into the south. So yeah, turning cooler next week, especially towards the weekend and early start next week, with the weather fronts trying to push in. Not cold enough for any windiness really, but cold enough to bring us back probably towards average, maybe below average and probably above average in the south when the weather systems do move through. Now, if you put on the 2-metre temperatures, you can see over the course of this afternoon those temperatures are widely in around that 10 to 12 degree mark, could even be slightly higher in a few spots. Overnight tonight, as that cold front does sweep through, it will turn colder behind it, but we're not expecting anything really that cold, probably around 4 or 5 degrees, the low in many areas. Through tomorrow afternoon, again, it will be a generally average day, probably more temperatures around that 7 to 9 degree mark, so maybe a degree above average in a few spots, but generally a little bit cooler, and that continues into Saturday as well. And you can see through Saturday afternoon, those temperatures are much more like normal in the north and the west, but through central areas, 10, 11 degrees is still quite mild in a few spots. As we head through into Sunday, a little bit of a cooler overnight there into Sunday morning, 3 to 5 degrees, and through the afternoon once again, temperatures around 6 to 8, so pretty much average or maybe slightly above average in a few areas, slightly below average in other areas for Sunday, so much more seasonal there. And into Monday, perhaps an overnight frost in a few areas, and through the afternoon, look at that, widely 5 to 7 degrees, pretty much bang on average for the time of year. And this is sort of cold compared to what we've had recently, but this is sort of typical January conditions, and then as we head into Tuesday, perhaps quite a widespread frost there, or potential for a frost there, with widely temperatures dropping down towards freezing 1 or 2 degrees. So yeah, turning colder next week. Nothing ridiculously cold, but a lot colder than what we've had recently. Now, if we do have a look at the GFS and see what that is showing over the course of the next few weeks, you can see that southwesterly tilt at the moment with weather systems moving in, giving us very unsettled conditions. You can see that low pressure coming on Saturday. Could be very windy for a time there in the north, but the low is filling in, so the intensities will be reducing. You can see why, a bit of a tilt to the northwest, that's why it's turning cooler next week. And you can see briefly a milder sector in the south, but the jet stream is few hundred miles further southwards there, that thicker black line, and generally the airflow is coming in from the north-westerly direction, so slightly cooler. Beyond that, low pressure tries to push in from the south, but as I said, a bit of a pattern change, higher pressure building in. Again, this wouldn't be ridiculously cold with actually a southeasterly flow, but where we see the air mass sort of be a bit more stagnant, could see a bit of an inversion, so average or maybe slightly below average, cold, frosty, and potentially foggy as well. It does try and move towards Scandinavia, but doesn't have a lot of a chance there up against a strong westerly flow, and sort of gets pushed away. But we're seeing reinforcements of higher pressure, and again signs of a bit more amplification in the jet stream. Now the GFS has the high pressure over the top of us, but other runs having it more out in the Atlantic, because on the colder side of the jet, more northerlies or northwesterlies. So definitely looks like high pressure could be making quite a big influence as we head towards the middle of the month. Again, not expecting anything ridiculously cold, but something perhaps more seasonable, and maybe some winteriness whenever we do see lows trying to ride in from the north. Again, you clear the upper air temperatures. It is not particularly cold there. It's generally average upper air temperatures, but it would be quite cold towards the surface simply because of those the high pressure creating inversion. If you do look at the GEM, see how that does compare over the course of the next 10 days. Again, a westerly flow at the moment. The jet stream shifts slightly further southwards, and it's going to be turning slightly cooler with that, as I said. And as we head right to the extended range, you can see that high pressure build potentially coming there at day 10. It does try and build a bit of an easterly flow, but there's not a lot of cold air available, as sort of central and northwestern Europe's been very mild at the moment, so we're going to need sort of a far-fetched easterly to get anything cold from this. But it's generally average upper air temperatures, and therefore we'd probably see average conditions at the surface, maybe below average, with a bit of an inversion under the higher pressure. But this would be a lot drier, with slightly fresher air masses as well. It would probably be clearer as well, with less precipitation, and generally more pleasant conditions, if not a little bit colder, a little bit colder than we have now, which I don't think too many people would mind. Sort of 5, 6, 7 degrees and clear skies, but if sunshine is a lot better than 11 or 12 degrees with drab, miserable, wet days. Now, if you do look at the ECMWF, just to finish the video, we can see how I've got more westerly flow coming in at the moment. Jet stream shifted slightly further southwards, remaining very unsettled, and then we see a bit of more of a northwesterly. Again, no high pressure directly over the top of us, but more ridging towards northeast Canada, forcing the jet stream slightly northwards there, and therefore slightly further southwards towards the UK. Bringing in those air masses more from the northwesterly, with a milder cause staying to the channel and further southwards. Again, this wouldn't be ridiculously cold, but it would probably be cold and snowy, perhaps for parts of Scotland at times. And yeah, it could be generally chilly, if not below average there for many, maybe snowy, as I said, across Scotland. But again, it's signs that the amplification of the jet stream coming, yes, the high pressures way further westwards than the GEM, the GM and the GFS was showing, but still a similar pattern, keeping us though on the more unsettled side of the higher pressure ridge. If you do finish by having a look at the ensemble members, you can generally see we are around average for the foreseeable future, mild across the next 2 or 3 days, then dropping to average or below average, then a big spike in upper air temperatures towards the middle of next week, and that's because that milder sector coming through in the southeast, but again, it's very, very quick to move through and mid back towards average until all the way around to the 21st of January. Expecting a bit more, perhaps, depending on the weather pattern. If it is more of a west or northwesterly flow, like the ECMWF was showing, expecting a bit of a zonal sine wave here, so we're seeing colder and slightly milder sectors move through at times. But if we did see higher pressure come in, I would expect those upper air temperatures to be generally average or where they are now, but those actual surface conditions to be colder than that, simply because of an inversion taking place. Precipitation still remains high, so there is quite a lot of uncertainty through the middle of the month towards the end, but perhaps a sign of slightly dry conditions there. And you can see that by having a look at the sea level pressure, generally rising in the longer term. You can see the operational GFS there quite high, and the black, thicker blue line there as well. The control run is quite high as well, indicating higher pressure from quite a few of the runs, but not all. Still some lower pressure runs there, so still quite a bit of uncertainty, but at least it's going to be higher pressure than what we have over the coming sort of 3 or 4 days, where it actually gets really quite unsettled indeed. If you compare to the ECMWF, the midnight run here, again, you can see generally above average, trending towards average, a brief spike in upper air temperatures next week, and then generally around average for the foreseeable future. ECMWF, though, definitely more on the unsettled side here, with quite a bit of precipitation still in the longer term. You put on the sea level pressure here, there is some ones going for sort of 120 millibars and above, but more on that more unsettled boat. So perhaps the ECMWF ensemble members more on the side of remaining unsettled, but slightly cooler than what we have now, whereas the GM and the GFS definitely had that higher pressure over the top of us. So we'll have to see exactly how it does play over the course of the next few weeks, but definitely looking like a bit of a change, whether it's actually in the pressure or whether it's just in the upper air temperatures, or we'll have to see. So anyway, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you again for another video soon.